Greetings and peace. I would like to start this with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace be with you and yours. I would like to do this presentation on the influence of Islam on Aleister Crowley. Many people would say that why would I do a video or a presentation on an individual like this? But keep in mind, we live in an inverted reality, and many things that they tell us are controversial are most likely pointing us to the truth in some way, shape, or form. During my time in Freemasonry, I resigned honorably in good standing and have moved on with my life. But during my time in the Masonic path, I did encounter individuals who were part simultaneously with, let's say, Thelema or O.T.O or any other orders that they were part of, which was connected to Crowley. And they always had a great appreciation for Islam. And they would tell me that, our way teaches us to respect Islam and respect the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which kind of aroused my curiosity. And I'm like, you know what? In the future, I will definitely do a video, just like how I did videos on Islam and Freemasonry, which no one was ever going to do besides me. I think this is another one of those where I will have to, I guess, bridge those gaps together. So I hope you enjoy what I have to offer. And again, I represent myself only. I do not represent any individual or organization. And this is just for education and entertainment, nonprofit purposes. First, we will learn a little bit about Crowley. And most people would say that, okay, he was part of the British MI6 spy network. And you have to keep in mind, it's not only the British or the MI6, but most intelligence agencies or spy agencies around the world. They always have a faction or a group of people who are always there dealing with the occult and supernatural phenomena and powers, right? Whether it's MI6, CIA, even my home country of Pakistan, right? If you look at the ISI, if you look at their logo, it's a picture of a goat. And if you have watched that movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats. So this is not something restricted to the white man or to the Western world. It's a global thing. So let's learn a little bit about Crowley before we get into the whole Islam influence and stuff. So Crowley, born in 1875, passed away in 1947. He comes from that British background of being an occultist, writer, magician. He's known for his founding the religion of Thelema. He was born into a very rich family and also a very religious family, but I guess he had that rebellious nature, right? And he was always striving to looking into more. And as his life went on, he went to Cambridge, and that's when his interest in the occult kind of grew more. And it was in 1904 when he was in Egypt where he received the Book of the Law, right, which he claims channeled from the entity Aiwass. Crowley often promoted the aspect of do what thou wilt, right, which is like individual freedom and following your own free will and accord. And many people had throughout that time had labeled him as a very wicked man because of how he would promote, I guess, the use of drugs and sexual rituals in his practices. So Crowley was involved. I believe he was also involved in Freemasonry at some point, but he was just disappointed like how I was, like, yo, these guys don't know anything. Right. But yeah, he was also involved in the Golden Dawn and founded the AA, O.T.O. And throughout his life, he had influence on many different things in mysticism, occultism, the different culture. And as time went on, like he is like that central figure in the world of the occult. Now, if you look at the book, The Esoteric Transfers and Constructions, that explores Crowley's relationship with Islam, focusing on the influence of Islamic traditions on his work and his construction of an imaginative image of Islam. And basically, it emphasizes the intersection of genealogical and cultural aspects in Crowley's portrayal of Islam, highlighting the role of Orientalism in shaping his perceptions. Crowley's direct experiences with Islam during his travels to India, Egypt, China, and North Africa had a significant influence on his life, shedding light on how these encounters influenced his spiritual and initiatic journey. And it's just like what I've explored with Freemasonry, how the Knights Templar, dealt with the Ismailis, right? The Shias, the Muslims, the assassins, how Christian Rosicrucians dealt with the Sufis, the Ikhwan al-Safa, and all of these influences of the Near East, especially the Sufis, found its way into the Western esoteric traditions, even though the West might not want to give the East any credit. So as we move along, Crowley's exploration of Enochian magic in Algeria in 1909 was significant. His travels and encounters with other cultures influenced his critique of Victorian culture and Christianity. The revelation of Thelema in Cairo in 1904 had similarities with Islam in terms of divine revelation and transmission of, the divine text or the divine book. The Quran and the Book of the Law share characteristics like the aphoristic structure and divine origin. Both books were believed to be immutable and to bring a new religious message. Analogies with Islam can also be seen in daily prayer practices and the concept of the Qibla in Thelema. It's like how in Islam we pray 5 times a day towards Mecca, towards a central point, the Qibla. And the Thelemic Qibla, right, with the bull skin house being the central point for rituals, such as the ritual of the Mark of the Beast and the Gnostic Mass. So you do have that similar aspect. The reference to the Kaaba in the Book of the Law suggests a similar administrative center for Thelema. Crowley's belief in the Aeon of Horus replacing the Aeon of Osiris is also there, which, along with the role of the Magi in announcing spiritual messages. Crowley's initiatic system, culminating in the Ipsissimus degree, right? IPSISSIMUS degree, parallels similar hierarchy structure in Islam, which shows the importance of reaching a certain level to become a prophet. And Crowley interprets the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his word Allah, which he describes ALLH, and his belief in hidden meanings as something that is only the true few can get. So even the Crowley believes the Prophet Muhammad to be a grand magus of the AA. Crowley believed that the only existing God is man, who can achieve a godlike state through self-discovery. And in the Sufi path, they describe these individuals as the Insan al-Kamil, the perfect man, who can achieve that. He interpreted Prophet Muhammad's message as promoting international cooperation in science rather than being a radical monotheist. Crowley saw Islam as a very virile religion for free men, contrasting it with Christianity as a religion for slaves. He viewed Islam positively, especially its secret teachings, the Sufi path, which he also was initiated in 1904, if you read his Confessions in Egypt, comparing it favorably to Christianity. Despite Crowley's criticism of Thelema religions, Islam was seen as closer to his own beliefs, emphasizing courage, honor, and self-respect. Crowley's connections with Islam and the Middle East is evident in the rituals of the O.T.O, the Ordo Templi Orientis, influenced by his interactions with Masonic networks. And if you look at Mansur al-Hallaj or Hassan ibn Sabah, the old man, it's all there, it's all relative. Crowley's interest in Islamic themes, such as Saladin and al-Hallaj, is shown in those rituals. His fascination with Islam predated his encounters with Abdullah Kulayim, and he even considered his successors as caliphs, drawing parallels with Islamic leadership. The O.T.O revival by Grady Lewis McMurdy in the 1970s also adopted the title of Caliphate O.T.O, reflecting Crowley's influence. These cultural aspects underline the complex relationship between Crowley's occult practices and Islamic traditions within the O.T.O. And as time went on, Crowley did incorporate all of those things. Crowley also had his Islamophilia, which was influenced by Richard Burton through connections with Oscar Eckenstein. Eckenstein's admiration for Burton and dedication of the Burtoninia collection hints at the impact of Burton on Crowley's spiritual beliefs. An exploration of Crowley's adoption of Burton's cultural cross-dressing and study of Islamic practices in Cairo suggests a deeper connection to Islam than initially portrayed. Crowley's immersion in Islam before the revelation of the Book of the Law highlights the significance of Islamic influence on Thelema. Crowley's encounter with Islam during travels to Muslim countries shaped his interest in similarities between Islam and Thelema through dramatic religious displays. Both Crowley and Burton challenged Victorian sexual norms, linking sexuality to a critique of Western culture. Crowley's exploration of Islamic sexual practices in literature show a subversive stance towards Victorian sexual restrictions, influenced by Burton's works. Homosexuality in Islamic cultures is portrayed positively by Crowley, reflecting a contrast with Victorian attitudes at that time. Now, the book, The Scented Garden, exemplifies this subversion and highlights mystical elements within esoteric ideas. And the exploration of exotic sexuality in Islamic context, or the context of Islam, challenges societal norms and offers a different perspective on sexual expression. Now, Crowley perceived Islam, or the path of the Sufi or Islam, as virile compared to Christianity due to colonial Orientalist influences. He displays an interest in Sufism, influenced by, of course, Burton. The Scented Garden combines sexual mysticism with Sufi doctrines. Crowley views Sufism as pantheistic and believes in a universal mysticism shared across cultures based on naturalistic observations of human existence. And Crowley's rejection of the concept of the propitiation related to theism and his positive views on Islam, influenced by Sufism and Burton, what kind of shaped all of the foundations that he left behind. Islam served as a means of expressing rebellion against Victorian society and Christianity, even at that time. There is a call, I believe, of how Crowley was able to see all of these different things. And I'm sure there are speculations on how him being a British intelligence asset, he was just there to go and explore and influence these different groups and cultures. But in reality, he incorporated all of that into his own system, right? So the influence of Islam on Western esotericism is there, and I think it needs to be really researched on how Sufism was influencing not only Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, even the Crowley stuff. So I guess this cultural interactions, which were often overlooked due to bias and racism, need to be further looked into, right? So even if you look at Crowley, right? Crowley, he identifies Aiwass as this entity which channeled it to him, and also dealing with Lam. And also in the Holy Quran, Lam is one of the names of Allah. So, there you have that. Crowley performed his rituals in bullskin, which was later destroyed in fires. The modern Gnostic movement or neo-Gnostic movements, which includes Crowley's Gnostic Catholic Church, lacks a comprehensive history of Crowley's interpretation of Islam, especially regarding the Kaaba and how he influenced or basically had that influence of Islam into his life. Now, the AA, Crowley's mystical order, and his concept of the Magi reveal his complex beliefs. And in the AA, he regards the Prophet Muhammad as a grand magus. Crowley's views on Jesus and Christianity are critical as he questions their historical and mythical aspects. The significance of the Liber Oz, written during World War II, adds depth to understanding Crowley's belief system. The second degree of the O.T.O ritual is set in the Egyptian desert, implying Thelema's compatibility with an Islamic context. Same with the Minerval degree, which is, I believe, the first one. So that whole connection, and even if you look at my playlist, if you go on my channel and go on the playlist, you see the playlist that I did on Islam, Sufism, and Freemasonry. It's all there with the Hashashin and the Knights Templar, Christian Rosencreutz who came and got initiated by the Sufis, right? And the symbol of the rose that was being used by the Qadiriya Sufi order way before Rosicrucianism. That link between the East and the West, I believe, needs to be reestablished and re-explored. During his student years at Cambridge University, Crowley published some of his poetical works with Leonard Smithers. Crowley expresses admiration for Richard Burton and Oscar Eckenstein, labeling Burton as a pioneer of spiritual and physical adventures. Burton was a notable figure in Crowley's life and a source of inspiration for his behaviors and beliefs. And Crowley also refers to other religious contexts in his teachings, like Hinduism, and explores the cultural cross-dressing. His interest in Islam and Sufism is evident through his works and his recommendation of Burton's Qasida to aspirants of his occult order, the AA. The influence of Burton's philosophies and ideas is apparent not only in Crowley's works, but also in his own personal foundation and practices. The Qasida is described as having extraordinary power with pantheistic and anti-Christian elements, according to Isabel Burton. Sufis have been seen as free thinkers, pantheists, and even sodomites. Crowley and Burton's ideas are part of the history of Western esoteric perception of Sufism. And if you look even with the René Guénon stuff, you could see that traditionalism and parallel comparison between the two, right? And it's very interesting how all of it is interconnected with all of it. And Crowley's development of an emphasis on the ritual and practice of Resh, it has a few similarities to the Islamic prayers, right? But of course, there are major differences. His books, which are Liber, DCCC, XIII, and the Ararita, right? Which, as its opening passage, it has a short excerpt from the Quran and a surah or chapter consisting of one verse, which the one that he was obsessed with was Surah Al-Ikhlas, which shows the oneness of God, that God is only one, the God, which neither begets nor is begotten, and he is perfect the way that he is, Allah. If you look at Magic Without Tears, he praises Islam as a very virile and a very stoic religion, right? In contrast to Christianity, which he viewed as like, I guess, cowardly or unmanly. His own practice, which is like an imitation of Sufi dhikrs or reciting chants and mantras, right? And which he recited Surah Al-Ikhlas 1,001 times, some would say 111 times, some would say 1,111 times. And that is what opened up. Because when he was initiated into Sufism, his sheikh or his teacher gave him that zikr, that recite, Surah Al-Ikhlas, right? 1,111 times. And after that, he was able to open up that channeling and receive the book of the law. Whereas some people would say that he encountered the entity named Lam. And of course, in the Quran and Islam, Alif, Lam, Mim, Lam is one of the names of Allah. And he had a very huge enthusiasm for Sufism, tasawwuf, right? It's a system of attainment where you can be the perfect being, right? Achieve that godlike status, to become the insan al-kamil. And Sufism is, see, that's why even with me, I left everything, because I explored every single Western esoteric order that there was. And I'm like, it all comes back to Islam in some way, shape, or form, or Sufism. I already have everything, so I don't need to waste my time with anything else. I already have Islam. And that is the beauty of all of this. And even if you look at his book, Magic Without Tears, I mean, it's all there from him directly. That is the beauty of all of this. Even if you look at the 5 adorations in the Equinox, Volume 1, Number 2, he also says, I praise thee, God, whose rays upstart beneath the bright and morning star, right? And he does mention Allahu Akbar in there. Also in the Liber Aleph, where, behold, in these chapters have I, thy Father, restricted myself, not speaking of any immediate echo of a word in the world, because their men being long since withdrawn into their silence. It is their one word, and that alone, that resoundeth undiminished through time. How Muhammad, who followeth, and is darkened and confused by his nearness to our own time, so that I say not save with diffidence that his word Allah may mean this or that. But I am bold concerning his doctrine of the unity of God, for God is man, and he said, therefore, man is one, and his will was to unite all men in one reasonable faith, to make possible international cooperation in science. Yet because he arose in the time of the greatest possible corruption and darkness, when every civilization and every religion had fallen into ruin, right, by the malice of the great sorcerer of Nazareth, as some say, he's still hidden in the dust of the Simum, and we may not perceive him in his true self of glory. Nevertheless, behold, O my son, this mystery. His true word was La Allah, which he spells as L-A-A-L-L-H. That is to say, there is no God, and La'al is that mystery of mysteries, which thine own eye perceived in thine initiation. And of that truth have the illusion and falsehood enslaved the souls of men, as is written in the book of the Mages. Why is it, and how did it come to be, that Muhammad, right, is a saint of the EGC and a magus of the AA? And it just shows you right there, even in these different books that he published, of how he regarded Islam and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The essential characteristics of the magus grade is that its possessor utters a creative magical word, which transforms the planet on which he lives by the installation of new officers to preside over its initiation, or the equinox of the gods, many can say. And this is how he regarded the word Allah, the true word, La Allah in Liber Aleph. And this is the way the Prophet Muhammad is considered by him, one of those Magi's and AAs, or the Grand Magus, right? Such as others that were there, like Lao Tzu, Buddha, Krishna, Thought, Moses, right? And Crowley himself says that all words are sacred and all prophets are true. Same what Islam says, it gives reverence to all prophets. And even in Surah 2, verse 62 of the Holy Quran, it tells us that Allah, the one and true God, does not care what religion we follow, as long as we are upright and righteous human beings. And what is Islam? Submission to the will of God. So and most of these spiritual paths are all talking about submitting and surrendering to a higher power, or to the universe or the divine or whatever have you. So as long as you submit and recognize that power, then that's pretty much it. Because Allah also mentions in the Quran that I created the men and the jinn on this earth only to recognize and worship me. So the Creator only wants your recognition. The rest of your life, it is do what thou wilt with your own free will and accord. And, even with Surah 2, verse 62, Allah tells you that He only cares if you're an upright, righteous human being, not about what specific religion you're following. So as long as you're an upright, righteous human being and you recognize that there is a God, and you recognize that within yourself, the Spirit of God, then this life becomes very easy. And you do what thou wilt and become successful in your life. Take care of yourself, take care of your families, love one another. And that is what Crowley's teaching too, right? There is no God but man, and do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, and love is the law, love under will, right? So it's all basically it's all connected in some way. Of course, you have the ancient Egyptian system, which is there as well. And Thelema in ancient Egyptian traditions, if you look at it, It draws significant symbolic and mythical universe of ancient religion or ancient Egyptian religious traditions, and how you have the god Horus too, which mirrors in his system. Crowley's revelation of the Book of the Law in Egypt is likened to the revelation of the Quran in Islam, emphasizing the role of a prophet and divine source in both religions. The Book of the Law heralded the beginning of the new era, the Aeon of Horus, echoing ancient Egyptian concepts of cosmic cycles and renewal. Crowley's interest in Islamic culture during his time in Egypt further underscores the intersection of ancient Egyptian and Islamic influences on his spiritual beliefs. If you look at a parallel comparison of the Quran and the Book of the Law, number 1, divine origin and immutability. Both texts believed to have divine origin and considered immutable. The revelation process. Second, Quran revealed to the Prophet Muhammad by Archangel Gabriel over 23 years. Book of the Law was dictated to Crowley by the entity Aiwass over 3 days. Third, the method of revelation. Quranic revelation through spiritual retreats to the Prophet Muhammad. Book of the Law dictated directly to Crowley. 4. Composition. The Quran composed of more than 6,000 verses. Book of the Law consists of 218 verses. 5. Purpose and influence. Purpose of both texts is to bring a new religious message to humanity, superseding previous revelations. Similarities in religious practices such as daily prayers, which shows that possible influence of Islam on Crowley's work, which is very self-evident. Islamic practices and rituals in Thelema. Crowley's immersion in Islamic practices, it was there even before his revelation of the Book of the Law in Cairo in 1904, and he learned the Arabic language and Islamic rituals from a sheikh to pass as a Muslim among themselves. And he utilized that knowledge for Thelema's development during his travel to these different countries and exploring Enochian magic in Algeria, right, with Victor Nuremberg, which shows that influence, and the establishment of that O.T.O ritual, right, even with the Minerval degree or the second degree, which shows that Islamic influence within that system. Crowley viewed the Prophet Muhammad as a Grand Magus of the AA, and he viewed him very highly. And I know many people would say that they would use that quote that I flap my face, or I flap my wings in the face of Muhammad. And, that's all nonsense. It's like the people online who use the Knights Templars, the Deuce Volt memes, right, to make it seem like that the Knights Templar were anti-Islamic, which is not true. And if you look at my videos, it shows that how there were many Muslims who were even within that rank. And their job was to be the protector of faith and defender of the faiths, which means all faiths. So people really don't have any idea at all. Crowley viewed, of course, the Prophet very highly, which are highlighted in these points, where number 1, his study of Islam. Crowley's interest in Islam led him to study Arabic and Islamic practices, and of course, aimed to pass as a Muslim among locals, typical MI6. Number 2, mastery of Islamic practices. Learn chapters of the Quran by heart, observed the prescribed 5 prayers, and enhanced his reputation for being a religious, pious man. Number 3, impressing the locals. Immersion in Islamic practices was not merely to blend in, and it aimed to impress locals dramatically with his mastery of their spiritual traditions. 4, utilization of Islamic knowledge. Used Islamic knowledge in a coffee shop altercation, and drew sigils and recited the Quran to quell a small riot. 5, interest in Sufism and mysticism. Interest in Sufism and Islamic mysticism and interactions with a sheikh who taught him Arabic and the Islamic faith. Sufism, the mystical dimension of Islam, has had a significant impact on Western esotericism through its teachings and practices. Western esotericists, including Crowley, have been drawn to Sufism for its emphasis on spiritual experiences, inner transformation, and esoteric knowledge. The influence of Sufism on Western esotericism can be seen in the incorporation of Sufi concepts, symbolism, and spiritual practices into various esoteric traditions, which includes Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. Sufi ideas of unity, transcendence, and direct mystical experiences have resonated with Western esotericists and occultists seeking deeper spiritual insights and connections. And the integration of Sufi elements into Western esotericism has enriched the diversity and depth of these traditions. And the integration also fosters a deeper understanding of mystical practices and spiritual paths. And even if you go back to the times of the Crusades, right? Even Saladin and Richard the Lionheart, they were all brothers. They were all brothers who met on the level, and these initiatic orders, to this very day, even the events happening in the Middle East, this stuff's been going on for a long, long time before we were even born, and will continue long after we're gone from this earth, with the different groups and orders that operate on human destiny. Richard Burton's influence on Crowley was significant in shaping Crowley's perception of Islam and Eastern cultures. Crowley's interest in Islamic mysticism and practices was sparked by Burton's explorations and writings on the subject. Burton's portrayal of Islam as a virile religion and his critiques of Western culture resonated with Crowley's own views. Crowley's emulation of Burton's travels and immersion in Islamic culture, particularly in Egypt and Algeria, reflected his admiration for Burton's approach. Both Burton and Crowley shared a dissatisfaction with Victorian society and Christianity, leading them to explore alternative perspectives found in Islamic traditions. Now, these are just layman terms, definitions for those that want to know just what the common knowledge is about these different things. Western esotericism, it encompasses mystical, occult, and spiritual beliefs and practices originating in Western culture. Traditionalism, a school of thought emphasizing the importance of traditional religious and metaphysical principles. Sufism, the internal Islam, the mystical dimension of Islam, focusing on the inward search for God and spiritual development. Intersections. Western esotericism often intersects with traditionalism and Sufism, drawing inspiration from divine spiritual traditions. Scholarly exploration. Scholars explore the connections between Western esotericism, traditionalism, and Sufism to understand their influences on each other. This is the surah which was given to Crowley as his dhikr. And when you are initiated into Sufism, each individual sheikh will give you your own zikr or surah or wazifa to recite. And you have to recite that repeatedly, that one specific teaching that's been given to you, or that one mantra or chant that's been given to you. And for Crowley, in 1904, he even talks about in his book Confessions, he was given Surah Al-Ikhlas. And Surah Al-Ikhlas talks about the unity and oneness of God. Some would say that he was told to recite this 1,001 times. Others would say 111 times. Others would say 1,111 times. And when he did that, then he, opened that entity, Iwas, and channeled the Book of the Law. And even him dealing with an entity named Lam, and of course Lam is the name of Allah in Islam and the Quran, Alif Lam Mim. So what is the surah that he was given? How do you say it in Arabic? And what does it mean in English? So the English translation of Surah Al-Ikhlas is, He is Allah, the God, the one and only. Allah, the eternal, the absolute. He begetteth not, nor is he begotten, and there is none like unto him. And how you say it in Arabic is, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Kul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, Lam yalid wa lam yulad, wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. It is self-evident at this point that Crowley had a deep admiration for Islam, which he considers a virile and realistic religion compared to Christianity. In his works, he recognized the Prophet Muhammad as a spiritual figure akin to his own mystical experiences. Crowley studied Islam closely, learning Arabic, memorizing parts of the Quran, and engaging with Sufi mysticism. He even noted similarities between the literary form of his own text, the Book of the Law, and the Quran. Despite this, Crowley did not aim to reduce his philosophy of Thelema to Islamic doctrines, but sought to reinterpret Thelemic practices through an Islamic perspective. This approach, he believed, had been underexplored compared to other traditions, like Christianity or Hermeticism. As we wrap this up, we look at the concept of the Magi in Islamic philosophy. 1. In Islamic philosophy, the concept of the Magi holds significance as a hierarchical system of ranks similar to initiatic degrees. The Magi are considered to be at the top of the system, consisting of prophets and philosophers, akin to the fourth rank in the Brethren of Purity system. The Magi are individuals who have reached the pinnacle of the initiatic system structure, embodying a profound spiritual and intellectual status. Islamic philosophy associates the Magi with figures like Lao Tzu, Gautama Buddha, right? Krishna, Dionysius from Greece, Tahuti, Thought, Moses, and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, each believed to have conveyed a spiritual message encapsulated in a word. Now, Crowley includes the Prophet Muhammad in his list of Magi, interpreting his word as Allah, A-L-L-H, and emphasizing a unique perspective on the doctrine of the unity of God as radical humanism. Crowley's interpretation suggests that Islam's hidden message promotes international cooperation in science and cultural progress, reflecting a form of radical humanism within the religion. And the Prophet Muhammad does tell us this, even if you look at the last sermon of him during his life, where he tells us that, O mankind, that it is your good character, which is the most important thing, and how a non-Arab or a white or black person or an Arab, non-Arab do not have any superiority over each other except by piety, good action, and good character. And how he had the Charter of Medina, which gave rights to Jews and Christians who were being persecuted by the pagan Arab tribes. So he instructs us to become one ummah. If you look at many of the Islamic lectures, they tell you to become one ummah. And ummah means the community of Muhammad, and all of it comes through mankind. So he was not only there for the Arabs, he was there for everyone, to bridge everyone together. And this is what changed Malcolm X's life as a black man in America, right? He was being taught a version of Islam which caused hatred in him. And when he went to Mecca and he saw that, he knew that Islam, everyone was equal and on the level. So this is what Crowley is showing here too, that international cooperation and humanism. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this presentation. I know it's not perfect, but I hope it was able to bridge that gap. And I know no one else was going to do this video, just like how I did the Islam, Sufism, and Freemasonry lectures. I hope this one was able to break the ice in some way, shape, or form as well. If you have any questions or comments, please email me at salmanshake911@gmail.com. All images used were retrieved from public domain searches and are the rightful property of their respective owners. The images used in this video are for the purpose of nonprofit awareness and education, which is protected by the copyright laws of fair use education purposes. All my videos are for nonprofit and education and entertainment purposes. Thank you. All rights reserved.